She doesn't have what it takes. The words sliced through the air like broken glass, each syllable a deliberate wound. But what crushed me wasn't just hearing them. It was watching my ex-husband David nod in agreement as his new wife Stephanie delivered that verdict about our 9-year-old daughter Maya, standing just 3 feet away from us in the school hallway. "Some children are natural performers," Stephanie continued, her voice dripping with false sympathy, "and others are better, suited for supporting roles." She glanced meaningfully at her own daughter Emma, who was clutching the script for Alice in Wonderland with a smug smile plastered across her face. David cleared his throat and added his own poison to the mix. "Maybe it's for the best, Jess. Maya's always been more of a behind-the-scenes kind of kid anyway." The casual dismissal in his voice made my stomach turn. This was his daughter he was talking about. Our daughter. And Maya? My beautiful, creative, storytelling genius of a daughter just stood there, her shoulders shrinking inward like a flower closing its petals against frost. Her eyes, usually so bright with imagination and wonder, had gone dull and distant. She clutched her rejected audition form in her small hands, the paper crumpled from her nervous grip. That's when I realized I was surrounded by people who didn't just fail to see Maya's magic. They actively chose to extinguish it. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed because tomorrow I've saved something extra special. For you! My name is Jessica Martinez, but everyone calls me Jess. I'm 35 years old, a single mother, and I work part-time as a graphic designer from my small apartment here in Riverside, Connecticut. The apartment isn't much to look at from the outside, but inside, it's filled with Maya's artwork covering every available wall space, her costume collection spilling out of closets, and stacks of library books about fairy tales and adventure stories towering in every corner. Maya is my world. At 9 years old, she has this incredible ability to transform into any character she can imagine. She doesn't just read stories, she becomes them. I've watched her spend entire afternoons in our living room, creating elaborate scenarios with voices and accents and gestures that would make professional actors jealous. She sees the world as one giant stage where every ordinary moment has the potential for magic. But apparently, the drama teacher at Riverside Elementary, Ms. Harrison, doesn't see what I see. Neither does the small-minded administration that runs that school like a business, instead of a place where children should be encouraged to explore their gifts. The day of Maya's audition for Alice in Wonderland had started with such hope. She had been preparing for weeks, practicing her monologue in front of our bathroom mirror every morning before school. She knew every line of Alice's journey down the rabbit hole, had created her own interpretation of the character that was both whimsical and deeply thoughtful. "Mama, what if Alice wasn't just curious about the rabbit?" she had asked me over breakfast that morning, spreading jam on her toast with the precise concentration of an artist. What if she followed him because she knew he needed help finding his way home? That's Maya. Even as a child, she sees layers in stories that adults miss. She finds empathy and depth where others see simple entertainment. But when she walked into that audition room, all Ms. Harrison saw was a quiet girl who spoke softly and didn't project her voice to the back row. I wasn't allowed in the audition room, of course. Parents had to wait in the hallway, pretending not to be anxious while their children's dreams hung in the balance. I sat on those uncomfortable plastic chairs, watching other mothers fidget with their phones or whisper about which kids were obvious choices for the lead roles. Then David and Stephanie arrived with Emma. I hadn't expected them to show up. David and I had agreed during our custody arrangement that school events would be my responsibility unless it was something major. But apparently, the spring play qualified as major in Stephanie's world. "Jess," David greeted me with that artificial politeness he'd perfected since our divorce 2 years ago. "I hope you don't mind us being here. Stephanie thought it would be nice to support Maya." Support Maya, right. Stephanie had never shown an ounce of genuine interest in Maya during the handful of times they'd interacted. But Emma was auditioning too, and Stephanie wasn't about to miss her stepdaughter's moment to shine alongside her biological daughter. "Of course not," I replied. Because what else could I say? We were in public, in front of other parents, and I had learned to pick my battles carefully when it came to David's new life. Emma emerged from the audition room first, practically glowing with confidence. "I think I nailed it," she announced to her parents, loud enough for everyone in the hallway to hear. Ms. Harrison said I had exactly the presence she was looking for in Alice. Stephanie pulled Emma into a congratulatory hug. "I'm so proud of you, sweetheart. You've been working so hard with your acting coach." Acting coach, of course. I thought about Maya's preparation, which consisted of reading library books about theater, practicing in front of our hand-me-down mirror, and developing her own understanding of the character through imagination and empathy. No expensive coaching, sessions, no professional headshots, no connections within the local theater community. When Maya finally came out of the audition room, I could tell immediately that something had gone wrong. Her face had that carefully blank expression she gets when she's trying not to cry in public. She walked straight to me and buried her face against my shoulder. "How did it go, honey?" I asked, stroking her hair. "She said thank you," Maya whispered. She didn't ask me any questions or let me do my second monologue. She just said thank you and wrote something on her paper. My heart sank. I knew enough about auditions to understand that when someone is genuinely interested, they engage. They ask follow-up questions, maybe request additional material, show some level of enthusiasm or curiosity. A simple thank you, followed by note-taking, was politely diplomatic rejection. David approached us with Emma and Stephanie flanking him like bodyguards. "So, Maya, how did your audition go?" he asked with the kind of forced cheerfulness adults use when they're about to deliver disappointing news. "It was fine," Maya said, quietly, not lifting her head from my shoulder. "I'm sure you did your best," Stephanie chimed in, her voice dripping with condescension. Emma said Ms. Harrison seemed very pleased with her audition. "Didn't you, Emma?" Emma nodded enthusiastically. She said I reminded her of a young actress she once worked with on Broadway. She asked me to read 3 different scenes. I felt Maya's shoulders tense against me. The contrast between the two girls' experiences couldn't have been more obvious or more painful. That's when Ms. Harrison appeared in the hallway, carrying a clipboard and wearing the kind of satisfied expression that meant she had already made her decisions. She spotted our group and walked over with the confidence of someone who believed her judgment was unquestionable. "Mr. and Mrs. Williams," she greeted David and Stephanie warmly. Emma was absolutely delightful. Such poise, such natural stage. Presence. "I think she's going to make a wonderful Alice." The words hit Maya like a physical blow. I felt her entire body go rigid against me, and I had to fight every maternal instinct not to say exactly what I was thinking about Ms. Harrison's obvious favoritism. "Thank you so much," Stephanie gushed. "Emma is just thrilled. This is exactly the kind of opportunity we were hoping for when we enrolled her at Riverside." Ms. Harrison then turned to me with a markedly different expression, professional but distant. "Mrs. Martinez, Maya seems like a lovely child, but I'm afraid she's not quite ready for a speaking role in this production. Her voice projection needs work, and she seemed quite nervous during the audition. Perhaps she could help with costumes. Or set design instead." The dismissal was swift and brutal. Not even a small part, not even a chance to prove herself in the ensemble. Just a polite suggestion that Maya might be useful behind the scenes, out of sight, where her inadequacies wouldn't interfere with the real performance. I opened my mouth to respond, to defend my daughter, to point out that Maya had barely been given a fair chance. But before I could speak, Stephanie inserted herself into the conversation. "That's probably for the best," she said with that fake, sympathetic smile. Some children are natural performers, and others are better suited for supporting roles. Maya strikes me as more of a helper than a star. The casualness of her cruelty took my breath away. She wasn't just agreeing with Ms. Harrison's assessment. She was actively reinforcing the idea that Maya was somehow lesser, that her dreams were inappropriate, that she should be grateful for whatever scraps of participation they were willing to offer. And David, my ex-husband, the man who had once promised to protect and cherish our daughter, simply nodded along. Maybe it's for the best, Jess. Maya's always been more of a behind-the-scenes kind of kid anyway. That's when I felt something break inside me. Not just disappointment or frustration, but something deeper. The part of me that had spent years accepting other people's definitions of what Maya could and couldn't do, what she was and wasn't capable of achieving. Maya pulled back from my shoulder and looked up at me with those enormous brown eyes that usually sparkled with mischief and wonder. Now they were filled with confusion and the beginning of something much worse. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The acceptance that maybe these adults were right about her limitations. "It's okay, Mama," she said quietly. "I didn't really want to be Alice anyway." But I knew that was a lie. I had seen her practicing, had listened to her talk about how she would bring the character to life, had watched her create costume sketches and practice different ways of falling down the rabbit hole. She had wanted this role with every fiber of her creative being. "Well then," David said, checking his expensive watch, "I guess that's settled. Come on, Emma, let's go celebrate your success with some ice cream." As they walked away, Emma chattering excitedly about her upcoming starring role while Maya watched them go, I felt the familiar weight of being dismissed, overlooked, and underestimated settle over both of us like a suffocating blanket. But this time, instead of accepting it, I felt something different rising in my chest. Not resignation, not defeat, but something much more dangerous. Determination. Because Maya's story wasn't over, not by a long shot. And I was about to make sure that Ms. Harrison, David, Stephanie, and anyone else who had written off my daughter's potential would have to face the truth about what they had missed. The real story was just beginning, and Maya was about to show them all what she could really do. The ride home from the school was silent except for the soft hum of my old Honda's engine and the occasional sniffle from Maya in the back seat. I kept glancing at her in the rearview mirror, watching as she stared out the window with that distant look that meant she was retreating into herself. It was a look I recognized because I had worn it so many times during my marriage to David, when he would dismiss my ideas or minimize my dreams with that same casual cruelty. Maya's small hands were folded neatly in her lap, still clutching that crumpled audition form. Every few minutes she would smooth it out against her legs, as if making it neat again could somehow change what had happened. The rejection was already becoming part of her story, and I could see her trying to make sense of it, trying to find a way to carry it that wouldn't break her. "Mama?" she said finally, her voice so small I had to strain to hear it over the engine. "Yes, sweetheart? Was I really that bad? In the audition?" The question hit me like a punch to the stomach. I pulled into our apartment complex parking lot and put the car in park before turning around to face her properly. Maya was looking at me with those enormous brown eyes, and I could see the doubt creeping in. The way children start to believe the worst things adults say about them when those words come from people who are supposed to know better. "Maya, look at me," I said, reaching back to take her hands in mine. "You were not bad. You were nervous because auditions are scary, but that doesn't mean you don't have talent. Ms. Harrison made a mistake today, a big one. But Stephanie said some kids are natural performers and some aren't. Maybe I'm just not one of the natural ones." The matter-of-fact way she repeated Stephanie's words made my heart ache. Children absorb adult judgments like sponges, especially when those judgments come from figures of authority or family members they're supposed to trust. I could see Stephanie's poison already starting to take root, threatening to convince Maya that she should lower her expectations, accept less, make herself smaller. "Stephanie doesn't know you the way I do," I said firmly. "She's seen you maybe 5 times in 2 years. She doesn't know about the characters you create, the stories you tell, the way you can make me laugh until my sides hurt with your impressions. She doesn't know that you spent 3 hours last week helping Mrs. Chen from downstairs feel better by doing a puppet show about a brave princess who saves her kingdom from sadness." Maya's grip on my hands tightened slightly. "But Ms. Harrison is a real drama teacher. She knows about acting." "Ms. Harrison knows about one kind of acting," I corrected. "The kind where you shout your lines loudly and move your hands in big gestures. But that's not the only way to be an actor, baby. The best performers are the ones who make you believe in the story they're telling. And you do that better than anyone I know." We sat in the car for a few more minutes, the afternoon sun filtering through the windshield and warming our faces. I watched Maya processing my words, her natural resilience fighting against the disappointment. She was stronger than I had been at her age, stronger than I had been at any age until recently. But she was still 9 years old, and 9-year-olds shouldn't have to develop armor against the cruelty of adults who were supposed to nurture them. "Can we go inside and practice some more?" she asked finally. "Maybe if I get louder, if I practice projecting my voice like Ms. Harrison wanted." "We can practice if you want to," I said carefully. "But not because Ms. Harrison told you to change. We practice because you love it, because it makes you happy, because telling stories is what you were born to do." Maya nodded, though I could tell she didn't quite believe me yet. The seed of self-doubt had been planted, and it would take time and effort to help her remember her own worth. As we gathered our things and headed up the 2 flights of stairs to our apartment, I found myself thinking about my own relationship with performance and creativity. I had been an art student in college when I met David. I was going to be a graphic designer, maybe start my own studio someday, create beautiful things that would make people feel something. David was charming and confident and seemed so impressed by my work. For the first year of our relationship, he would brag to his friends about his artistic girlfriend, show off my paintings and sketches like trophies. But after we got married, something shifted. My art became a hobby, something cute that I did in my spare time, but not something serious. When Maya was born, David made it clear that my focus should be on being a good mother and supporting his career. My easel got moved to the basement, then to the garage, and finally to storage. By the time our marriage ended, I had almost forgotten that I had ever been someone who created beauty for a living. It wasn't until after the divorce, when I had to figure out how to support Maya and myself, that I dusted off my design skills and started freelancing. Working from home, taking whatever projects I could find, slowly rebuilding not just my portfolio, but my confidence in my own abilities. Maya had watched this entire journey, seen me go from someone who apologized for taking up space to someone who could advocate for herself with difficult clients and stand up for her creative vision. Maybe that's why her defeat in the audition hurt so much. I had worked so hard to show her that she didn't have to shrink herself to make others comfortable, that her voice mattered, that her dreams were valid. And then, in one afternoon, people who barely knew her had convinced her to doubt all of that. Our apartment felt like a sanctuary after the sterile halls of the school. Maya immediately went to her room to change out of her audition clothes, a simple blue dress that she had chosen because she thought it looked like something Alice might wear. I made us both hot chocolate, the real kind with melted chocolate and whipped cream, not the powdered mix. Comfort food for a disappointing day. When I brought the steaming mugs to her room, I found Maya sitting on her bed surrounded by books about theater and fairy tales. She had changed into her favorite outfit, purple leggings with tiny stars and an oversized sweater that had belonged to me in college. Her hair was in 2 messy braids, and she had already started sketching in one of her many notebooks. "What are you drawing?" I asked, settling onto the bed beside her. "Different ways Alice could look," she said, not looking up from her sketch. Ms. Harrison said Emma reminded her of a Broadway actress, but I think Alice could look like lots of different people. She could be tall or short, have curly hair or straight hair, be loud or quiet. The story doesn't really say, does it? I leaned over to look at her sketches and felt my breath catch. Maya had drawn multiple versions of Alice. One looked thoughtful and bookish. Another was clearly someone who asked a lot of questions. A third seemed shy but determined. Each face was unique, but they all had the same quality: a sense of wonder, mixed with courage. These are incredible, Maya. You see so many possibilities in the character. I was thinking about what you said, about different kinds of acting, she continued, finally meeting my eyes. Maybe I could write my own version of Alice in Wonderland. One where Alice isn't just curious about the rabbit hole, but where she's actually trying to solve a mystery or help someone who's lost. The resilience in her voice amazed me. Here she was, hours after being told she wasn't good enough, already finding ways to reclaim the story for herself. This was the Maya I knew, the one who turned disappointment into creativity, who saw opportunities where others saw limitations. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said. Tell me more about this version of Alice. Maya's eyes lit up, and suddenly she was gesturing animatedly as the story poured out of her. Well, Alice is walking through the garden, right? And she sees the white rabbit, but he's not checking his watch because he's late. He's crying because he's lost something precious. Maybe a locket or a photograph or a letter from someone he loves. And Alice follows him, not because she's bored, but because she recognizes that feeling of losing something important. As she talked, Maya began acting out different parts of the story. She became Alice, concerned and determined. Then she shifted into the white rabbit, her voice taking on a different tone, her posture changing completely. Without realizing it, she was showing me exactly the kind of natural talent that Ms. Harrison had failed to see. And when Alice falls down the rabbit hole, Maya continued, it's not an accident. She chooses to go down because she knows that's the only way to help the rabbit find what he's lost. And all the crazy characters she meets, the Mad Hatter and the Queen of Hearts and everyone, they're all dealing with their own kind of loss, and Alice helps them too. That's beautiful, sweetheart. You've turned Alice into a healer, someone who helps others instead of just having adventures. Yeah. Maya bounced slightly on the bed, her excitement growing. And maybe at the end, when Alice finds the rabbit's lost treasure, she realizes that helping others helped her find something she didn't even know she was missing. What was she missing? Maya paused, thinking seriously about the question. The knowledge that she was brave enough to help people, even when it meant doing something scary like jumping down a rabbit hole. The profundity of her reimagining took my breath away. This 9-year-old girl had taken a classic story and found deeper meaning in it, had created characters with emotional depth and genuine motivation. She was doing exactly what the best storytellers do, finding the human truth at the heart of fantasy. Maya, what you just described is more interesting than any version of Alice in Wonderland I've ever heard. You have such a gift for understanding. What makes characters real? Do you really think so? Even if I can't project my voice loud enough for the back of the auditorium? Especially because of that. The best actors don't need to shout to make people listen. They make you lean in because you don't want to miss a single word. Maya smiled, the first real smile I had seen from her since leaving the school. She picked up her notebook again and started writing, her pencil moving quickly across the page as she captured her ideas. I sat quietly beside her, watching my daughter transform rejection into creation, watching her refuse to let someone else's limited vision define her possibilities. But even as I marveled at Maya's resilience, I could feel anger simmering underneath, my pride. Ms. Harrison had missed this. She had spent maybe 5 minutes with Maya and decided that projection and stage presence were more important than imagination and emotional intelligence. She had looked at my quiet, thoughtful daughter and seen only limitations instead of potential. and David and Stephanie had been so quick to agree, so ready to accept that Maya wasn't star material. They had stood in that hallway and watched her dreams get crushed, and their only response was to suggest that maybe she belonged in the background, helping the real performers shine. Well, they were all wrong. Maya had star quality. It just wasn't the kind that fit into their narrow definitions of what a performer should be. And I was starting to form a plan to make sure they understood exactly what they had missed. I thought about Dr. Chen, the principal who had been hired just 6 months ago. Unlike the previous principal, who had been at Riverside for decades and seemed more interested in maintaining the status quo than challenging it, Dr. Chen had a reputation for innovation and inclusivity. I had heard other parents talking about her efforts to expand the arts program and create more opportunities for different kinds of learners. Maybe it was time Dr. Chen learned about what had happened at the auditions. Maybe she needed to see what Maya could do when given a real chance, not just a 5-minute slot with a teacher who had already made up her mind. As Maya continued writing and sketching her version of Alice in Wonderland, filling page after page with ideas and dialogue and character descriptions, I made a decision. We weren't going to accept this rejection quietly. We weren't going to let Maya learn that dreams should be abandoned at the first sign of resistance. And we weren't going to let small-minded adults convince my brilliant daughter that she should make herself smaller to fit into their limited vision of what was possible. The school play wasn't over yet. In fact, it was just beginning. And Maya was going to get the chance to show them all what she could really do. The next few days passed, in a blur of routine that felt anything but normal. Maya went to school each morning with her backpack and her lunchbox, same as always, but there was something different in the way she carried herself. Her shoulders were slightly hunched, as if she were trying to make herself smaller, less noticeable. During breakfast, she would eat her cereal quietly while staring out the window, and I could see her mind working, processing what had happened at the audition. I had called in sick to work that first day after the rejection, unable to concentrate on designing logos and brochures when my heart was breaking for my daughter. Instead, I spent the morning researching everything I could find about Dr. Rebecca Chen, the new principal. Her background was impressive. She had a master's degree in education with a focus on arts integration, had spent 5 years teaching in urban schools where creativity was often the key to reaching students who struggled in traditional academic settings, and had written several articles about the importance of recognizing different types of intelligence in children. The more I read about Dr. Chen's educational philosophy, the more convinced I became that she needed to know what had happened with Maya's audition. But I also knew I had to be strategic about it. This wasn't just about getting Maya into the school play anymore. It was about challenging a system that routinely overlooked children who didn't fit into neat, conventional categories. Maya's teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, had always been one of her biggest supporters. During parent-teacher conferences, she would tell me stories about Maya's contributions to class discussions, how she would offer unique perspectives on the books they read, how she had an intuitive understanding of character motivation that impressed even Ms. Rodriguez. Last month, when they were reading Charlotte's Web, Maya had written an essay from Templeton, the rat's perspective that was so insightful, Ms. Rodriguez had asked permission to share it with other teachers. That Wednesday afternoon, I made an excuse to pick Maya up from school instead of letting her take the bus home. I wanted to see for myself how she was handling things with her classmates, whether the rejection had affected her interactions with her friends. What I saw when I arrived at the school made my heart sink even further. Maya was sitting alone on the bench outside the school entrance, reading a book while other children ran around the playground nearby. Normally, she would have been in the middle of a group, telling stories or organizing elaborate games of pretend. But today, she seemed to have withdrawn into herself, choosing the safety of solitude over the risk of someone asking her about the audition. Emma, meanwhile, was surrounded by a cluster of girls who were all talking excitedly about the upcoming play. I could see Emma demonstrating different poses and expressions, clearly reveling in her new status as the lead actress. Every few minutes, Her gaze would drift over to where Maya sat alone, and I could see something in her expression that looked almost like pity mixed with superiority. When Maya spotted me walking across the parking lot, her face lit up with genuine relief. She shoved her book into her backpack and ran toward me, and for a moment she looked like her old self again, energetic and happy to see her mom. But as we walked toward the car, I noticed she kept glancing back at the group around Emma, and I could see the questions in her eyes. Why them and not me? What do they have that I don't? How was school today? I asked as we buckled our seatbelts. Fine, she said, which in 9-year-old language usually meant anything but fine. Did anyone ask you about the audition? She was quiet for a moment, picking at the straps of her backpack. Emma told everyone she got the lead role. She said Ms. Harrison told her she had star quality, and that some of the other kids who auditioned just weren't cut out for performing. The casual cruelty of children repeating adult judgments never ceased to amaze me. Emma was just 9 years old herself, but she had already learned to wield status and exclusion like weapons. And the worst part was, she probably didn't even realize how much damage she was doing. What did you say when she said that? Nothing. I just listened. Maya's voice was small, defeated. Maybe she's right, Mama. Maybe I'm just not cut out for performing like other kids are. I had to resist the urge to turn the car around, march back into that school, and have some very direct words with Emma about kindness and empathy. But I knew that wouldn't help Maya in the long run. What she needed was to remember her own strength, her own unique gifts, and to stop measuring herself against other people's definitions of success. Maya, do you remember the story you told me last week about the girl who could talk to shadows? She looked up, curiosity replacing some of the sadness in her eyes. The one where the shadows were actually guardians who protected people from bad dreams? That's the one. Do you remember how you acted out all the different shadow characters? How you made each one have a different personality and voice? You had me completely captivated for a whole hour. That's a kind of performing, you know? That's storytelling, at its finest. But that's just pretend, she said. That's not real acting like what Emma's doing. Who says it's not real acting? Maya, what you do when you tell stories, when you become different characters, when you help people see the world through someone else's eyes, that's the most important kind of performing there is. It's the kind that changes how people think and feel. We spent the rest of the drive home talking about different kinds of storytelling, about how some of the greatest actors in history were known not for projecting their voices loudly, but for making audiences believe completely in the characters they portrayed. I told her about people like Tilda Swinton and Lupita Nyong'o, performers who commanded attention not through volume but through presence and authenticity. That evening, as I was making dinner, Maya came into the kitchen with her notebook and an expression I recognized. It was the look she got when she had been wrestling with a problem and was finally ready to share her solution. Mama, I've been thinking about what you said about different kinds of performing, she began, settling herself at the kitchen table. And I want to show Dr. Chen my version of Alice in Wonderland. I turned away from the stove to give her my full attention. Tell me more about that idea. Well, you said Dr. Chen is different from the old principal, right? And she cares about all kinds of learning, not just the regular kind. So maybe she would understand that my Alice story is a different way of showing what I can do. The hope in her voice was both heartening and heartbreaking. She was still willing to put herself out there, to risk another rejection, because she believed in her own story. But I could also hear the uncertainty underneath, the part of her that was still afraid of being dismissed again. I think that's a wonderful idea, I said carefully. But before we talk to Dr. Chen, maybe we could work on your story together. Not to change it, but to help you feel really confident about sharing it. Maya's eyes brightened. Could we? Could we maybe even act it out, like you used to do when you were in college? I felt something unexpected. Excitement mixed with nervousness. I hadn't performed in any capacity for years, had convinced myself that I wasn't cut out for that kind of creative expression. But seeing Maya's enthusiasm, remembering how much joy I used to find in bringing stories to life, I realized that maybe it was time to reconnect with that part of myself. "Yes," I said decisively, "let's work on it together. We'll create something so beautiful and meaningful that Dr. Chen will have to see what an incredible storyteller you are." Over the next week, Maya and I spent our evenings transforming our living room into a workshop for creativity. We pushed the furniture against the walls to create space for movement, and Maya would read her version of Alice in Wonderland aloud, while I helped her find ways to embody each character physically. Her natural instincts were remarkable. She understood intuitively how to change her posture and voice to become different characters, how to use simple gestures to convey complex emotions. I found myself remembering skills I had thought were buried forever. In college, I had taken several acting classes alongside my art courses, and I had loved the collaborative process of bringing stories to life. Working with Maya brought back that same sense of creative partnership, that feeling of being completely present in the moment of creation. Maya's version of Alice was unlike anything I had ever seen. Her Alice was thoughtful and empathetic, someone who listened carefully. Before acting, who asked questions not out of mere curiosity, but out of genuine care for others. The Wonderland she had created was a place where characters were dealing with real emotional challenges: loss, loneliness, fear of not being understood. And Alice helped them not by solving their problems, but by really seeing them. The White Rabbit wasn't just late. He was carrying the weight of responsibility for others and had forgotten how to take care of himself. The Mad Hatter wasn't simply mad. He was an artist whose creativity had been misunderstood for so long that he had started to believe he was broken. The Queen of Hearts wasn't just tyrannical. She was someone who had been hurt so many times that she protected herself by never showing vulnerability. And Alice, in Maya's version, helped each character by reflecting back their own wisdom, by asking the right questions, by creating space for them to be truly seen. It was sophisticated storytelling that would have impressed college literature students, coming from the mind and heart of a 9-year-old girl. As we worked together, I watched Maya's confidence rebuild day by day. She stood taller, spoke with more conviction, and began to carry herself like someone who had something important to share with the world. The rejection from Ms. Harrison was still there. I could see it in moments when doubt would flicker across her face, but it was no longer defining her relationship with her own creativity. On the Thursday evening before we had planned to approach Dr. Chen, Maya and I were in the middle of rehearsing her favorite scene, where Alice helps the Mad Hatter remember why he loved making beautiful things, when there was a knock at our apartment door. It was unusual for anyone to visit without calling first, and for a moment, my heart raced with the irrational fear that something was wrong. When I opened the door, I was surprised to find Ms. Rodriguez standing in the hallway, holding a small gift bag and wearing an apologetic smile. "Ms. Rodriguez, is everything okay? Did something happen at school?" "Oh no, everything's fine," she assured me quickly. "I hope you don't mind me stopping by unannounced. I was in the neighborhood visiting my sister and I wanted to check on Maya. I noticed she's been a bit quieter in class since the auditions for the play, and I wanted to make sure she was doing all right." I invited her in, touched by her genuine concern for Maya's well-being. Ms. Rodriguez had always gone above and beyond for her students, but taking time from her personal evening to check on one child showed a level of care that reminded me why I had always felt comfortable with Maya being in her classroom. Maya emerged from the living room, still dressed in the flowing scarf she had been using as a costume piece, her cheeks flushed with excitement from our rehearsal. When she saw Ms. Rodriguez, she smiled genuinely for the first time all week. "Ms. Rodriguez, what are you doing here?" "I came to bring you something," Ms. Rodriguez said, handing Maya the gift bag. "And to tell you that I heard about the audition results. I want you to know that I think Ms. Harrison made a mistake." Maya's eyes widened as she opened the bag and pulled out a beautiful hardcover edition of Alice's Adventures in Wonderland, illustrated by a contemporary artist. The images were dreamy and thoughtful, nothing like the bright, cartoonish versions most people associated with the story. "I saw this at the bookstore and thought of you," Ms. Rodriguez explained. "The way you write about characters, the way you understand what motivates people. You have such a gift for seeing the deeper meanings in stories. I thought you might like this artist's interpretation." "Thank you," Maya whispered, flipping through the pages with reverent care. "These pictures are beautiful. They make Alice look like a real person, not just a character in a fairy tale." "That's exactly what I thought too. And Maya, I want you to know that your essay about Templeton the Rat was the most insightful piece of writing I've received from a student in years. You have a way of understanding characters that most adults would envy." I felt tears prick at my eyes, grateful beyond words that Maya had this teacher who saw her clearly, who recognized her gifts and took the time to nurture them. Ms. Rodriguez's validation meant more to Maya than she would probably ever realize, coming as it did in the wake of Ms. Harrison's dismissal. "Ms. Rodriguez," I said hesitantly, "Maya has been working on her own version of Alice in Wonderland. Would you like to see what she's created?" Maya looked at me with surprise and then excitement. This wasn't part of our plan, but something about Ms. Rodriguez's presence made it feel like the right moment to share what we had been working on. "I would love that," Ms. Rodriguez said, settling herself on our couch with genuine interest. Maya took a deep breath, and I could see her gathering her confidence the way she did before any performance. Then she began, and watching her transform into Alice in front of her teacher was like watching magic happen in our living room. For the next 20 minutes, Maya embodied each character with such conviction and emotional depth that both Ms. Rodriguez and I were completely captivated. She moved through our makeshift performance space with natural grace, her voice changing subtly for each character, her entire being committed to the story she was telling. When she finished, the living room was completely silent for a moment. Then Ms. Rodriguez began to applaud, slowly at first and then with obvious enthusiasm. "Maya," she said, her voice filled with awe, "that was extraordinary. The way you've reimagined that story, the emotional depth you've given each character. This is professional-level storytelling. You've taken a classic tale and made it completely your own." Maya glowed under the praise, but I could see her trying to remain modest. "Ms. Harrison said I wasn't ready for speaking roles," she said quietly. Ms. Rodriguez's expression shifted, and I saw something that looked like controlled anger flash across her face. "Maya, what I just witnessed was not just ready for speaking roles. It was ready for center stage. Ms. Harrison missed something truly special, and that's her loss." She turned to me. "Jessica, has Dr. Chen seen Maya perform?" "No, but we're planning to set up a meeting with her. We thought she might be interested in seeing a different kind of approach to theater." "She would be more than interested," Ms. Rodriguez said firmly. "Dr. Chen has been looking for ways to expand our definition of what constitutes excellence in the arts. What Maya just shared is exactly the kind of innovative, thoughtful performance she wants to encourage." As Ms. Rodriguez prepared to leave, she pulled me aside while Maya was carefully placing her new book on her bookshelf. "Jessica, I need to tell you something. There have been some concerns raised among several teachers about how the play auditions were conducted. Ms. Harrison has a history of favoring students from certain families, particularly those who make significant donations to the arts program. What happened with Maya wasn't fair, and it wasn't based on talent or potential. Her words confirmed what I had suspected, but hadn't wanted to believe about the politics involved in Maya's rejection. It wasn't just about projection or stage presence. It was about favoritism and influence, about who had access and who didn't. Dr. Chen needs to see what Maya can do," Ms. Rodriguez continued. "Not just for Maya's sake, but because she's trying to change the culture at this school. She needs examples of what happens when we judge children by narrow criteria instead of recognizing diverse forms of talent. After Ms. Rodriguez left, Maya and I sat together on the couch, the new book open between us. She traced the illustrations with her finger, and I could see her mind already working, finding new interpretations and possibilities in the artwork. "Mama," she said thoughtfully, "maybe what happened with the audition was supposed to happen. Maybe I needed to create my own version of Alice instead of trying to be what Ms. Harrison wanted." Her wisdom took my breath away. Here was my 9-year-old daughter, finding meaning and purpose in rejection, transforming disappointment into creative growth. She was teaching me something about resilience that I had never fully understood before. "I think you might be right about that," I said, pulling her closer. "Sometimes the most beautiful things come from the places where we thought we failed." That night, as I tucked Maya into bed, she looked up at me with clear, determined eyes. "Tomorrow, let's call Dr. Chen. I want to show her my Alice, not because I want to be in Ms. Harrison's play anymore, but because I want her to know that there are different ways to tell stories, different ways to be an actor." "Are you sure you're ready?" "I'm sure. And Mama, thank you for helping me remember that my way of doing things isn't wrong. It's just different." As I turned off her bedroom light and closed her door, I realized that Maya had already won something far more valuable than a role in the school play. She had discovered her own voice, her own vision, her own understanding of what it meant to be a storyteller. And tomorrow, we would make sure Dr. Chen understood exactly what Riverside Elementary had in their midst. A truly extraordinary young artist who deserved to be seen, heard, and celebrated for exactly who she was. Friday morning arrived with an urgency that made my hands shake as I dialed the school's main office. Maya sat across from me at our kitchen table, methodically eating her cereal while reviewing the notes she had written about her Alice story. She had insisted on getting up early to prepare, treating this meeting request with the same seriousness she brought to everything that mattered to her. "Riverside Elementary, this is Mrs. Patterson speaking." "Good morning, Mrs. Patterson. This is Jessica Martinez, Maya Martinez's mother. I was hoping to schedule a meeting with Dr. Chen sometime today if possible. It's regarding Maya's involvement in the arts program." There was a pause, and I could hear the soft clicking of computer keys. "Let me check Dr. Chen's calendar. Is this urgent, Mrs. Martinez? Dr. Chen typically schedules parent meetings at least a week in advance." I glanced at Maya, who had stopped eating and was listening intently to my side of the conversation. Her eyes held that mixture of hope and anxiety that had become familiar over the past week. "It's quite important," I said carefully. "Maya has created something extraordinary that I believe Dr. Chen would want to see, especially given her commitment to expanding arts education at Riverside. Hold, please." The hold music was some generic classical piece that seemed to stretch on forever. Maya reached across the table and squeezed my hand, and I was struck again by how mature she seemed in these moments, how she had learned to carry herself with dignity even when facing uncertainty. "Mrs. Martinez, Dr. Chen can see you at 11:30 this morning. Would that work for you?" "That would be perfect. Should Maya come with me?" "Dr. Chen requests that students be present for meetings that concern them directly, so yes, please bring Maya." After I hung up, Maya and I sat in silence for a moment, both processing the reality that this was actually happening. In just a few hours, she would be sharing her creation with someone who had the power to change how she was seen at school. "Are you nervous?" I asked. "A little," she admitted, "but also excited. I keep thinking about what Ms. Rodriguez said, about how Dr. Chen wants to encourage different kinds of excellence. Maybe she'll understand what I'm trying to do with my story." The morning passed slowly. Maya changed clothes 3 times, finally settling on her favorite purple dress with small silver stars embroidered along the hem. It was the same dress she had worn to the school's poetry recital last spring when she had performed an original poem about a girl who could speak to the wind. She called it her brave dress, and I was glad she had chosen to wear it today. I spent the time reviewing everything I had learned about Dr. Chen's educational philosophy, trying to anticipate how best to present Maya's work. But more than that, I found myself reflecting on the larger implications of what we were doing. This wasn't just about getting Maya recognition for her talent. It was about challenging a system that had failed to see her worth, about standing up for all the children whose gifts didn't fit into conventional categories. At 11:15, we walked through the front doors of Riverside Elementary. The hallways were quiet, except for the muffled sounds of lessons in progress behind closed classroom doors. Maya walked beside me with careful, measured steps, clutching her notebook and the beautiful illustrated edition of Alice in Wonderland that Ms. Rodriguez had given her. Mrs. Patterson greeted us warmly and led us to Dr. Chen's office. I had never been in the principal's office before. During my own school years, that had been a place reserved for students in trouble. And as a parent, I had always interacted with teachers and staff in more neutral spaces like classrooms or the main office. Dr. Chen's office was different from what I had expected. Instead of the imposing desk and formal chairs I remembered from my childhood, the space was arranged more like a comfortable living room. There were bookshelves filled with education journals and children's literature, plants in every available spot, and student artwork covering the walls. A round table with 4 chairs sat near the window, and that's where Dr. Chen was waiting for us. "Mrs. Martinez, Maya, thank you for coming in." Dr. Chen stood to greet us, and I was immediately struck by her warm presence. She was younger than I had expected, maybe early 40s, with kind eyes and an easy smile that seemed genuine rather than professional. "Please, have a seat wherever you're comfortable." Maya chose the chair closest to the window, where afternoon sunlight filtered through and created patterns on the table. She placed her notebook and book carefully in front of her, her movements deliberate and respectful. "Maya, I understand you have something special to share with me," Dr. Chen said, directing her attention entirely to my daughter. "Your teacher, Ms. Rodriguez, stopped by my office yesterday and told me you've created your own version of Alice in Wonderland. I'm very interested to hear about it." Maya's face lit up at the mention of Ms. Rodriguez. "She gave me this book," Maya said, showing Dr. Chen the illustrated edition. "The pictures made me think about Alice in a different way, and that's when I decided to write my own version." "What made you want to rewrite such a classic story?" "Well," Maya began, settling into that thoughtful tone she used when she was working through complex ideas, "I was thinking about why Alice followed the white rabbit in the first place. Most people say it was because she was curious or bored, but I thought maybe there was a deeper reason." Dr. Chen leaned forward slightly, giving Maya her complete attention. "Tell me more about that." "In my version, Alice sees that the white rabbit is sad. He's lost something precious, a locket with a picture of his family. And Alice follows him not because she wants an adventure, but because she recognizes what it feels like to lose something important, and she wants to help." Maya opened her notebook and began to read, but within sentences, she was no longer just reading, she was performing. Her voice took on different tones for each character. Her posture shifted subtly as she embodied Alice, then the rabbit, then the various Wonderland creatures. She moved through her story with natural grace, never theatrical or forced, but completely committed to bringing her characters to life. I watched Dr. Chen's face as Maya performed, saw her eyebrows raise slightly in surprise, then watched her expression shift to one of fascination and delight. She wasn't just listening politely to a student's creative project. She was genuinely captivated by what Maya was sharing. Maya's version of Wonderland was a place where each character was dealing with some form of loss or confusion, and Alice helped them not by fixing their problems, but by truly seeing them and asking thoughtful questions. The Mad Hatter had lost his confidence in his creativity. The caterpillar had forgotten how to transform. The Queen of Hearts had lost her ability to trust. And Alice, through her empathy and genuine curiosity, helped each character remember their own strength. When Maya finished, she closed her notebook and looked up at Dr. Chen with a mixture of pride and vulnerability. The office was completely quiet for a moment, and I could see Maya holding her breath, waiting for a response. "Maya," Dr. Chen said finally, her voice filled with admiration. "That was absolutely remarkable. The emotional depth you've brought to these characters, the way you've reimagined their motivations. This is sophisticated storytelling that would impress college students." Maya's shoulders relaxed, and a smile spread across her face. "Really? Really? And the way you performed it, how you became each character without losing the thread of the narrative, that takes a level of skill and understanding that is quite here." Dr. Chen turned to me. "Mrs. Martinez, I understand Maya auditioned for our spring production of Alice in Wonderland?" "She did," I said carefully. Ms. Harrison felt that Maya wasn't ready for speaking roles. Dr. Chen's expression remained neutral, but I caught a brief flicker of something. Disappointment, perhaps, or frustration. "I see. And what made you decide to bring Maya's work to my attention?" I took a breath, knowing this was the moment. To be completely honest, because I believe there are many ways to demonstrate talent and readiness, and Maya's version of Alice shows a level of creativity and skill that deserves to be recognized. Ms. Rodriguez helped us understand that you're working to broaden how we define excellence in the arts here at Riverside. "That's absolutely correct." Dr. Chen looked back at Maya. "Maya, would you be interested in performing your version of Alice for a larger audience? I'm thinking we might arrange a special assembly where you could share your work with other students and teachers." Maya's eyes widened. "Like in front of the whole school?" "We could start smaller if you prefer. Maybe just a few classes to begin with and see how it goes from there. What matters is that your creativity and your unique interpretation get the recognition they deserve." I felt tears prick at my eyes, watching Maya process this unexpected opportunity. A week ago, she had been told she wasn't ready for any kind of performance role. Now, the principal was offering her a platform to share her own artistic vision. "I would like that," Maya said softly. "But what about the regular Alice play? What about Emma and the other kids who got parts?" Dr. Chen considered this question seriously. "Maya, there's room for both kinds of artistic expression at our school. Ms. Harrison's production will proceed as planned, and your performance will be something entirely separate, a showcase of original student creativity. They serve different purposes and both have value." She paused, then continued with something that sounded like a larger decision forming. "In fact, Maya, your work has given me an idea. What if we created a regular program where students could share original creative works? Poetry, stories, music, visual art. A monthly showcase that celebrates the different ways our students express themselves?" Maya looked at me with excitement and surprise, as if she couldn't quite believe this was really happening. I nodded encouragingly, feeling my own excitement building at Dr. Chen's vision. "That sounds wonderful," I said. "Maya has so many friends who are creative in different ways. They would love an opportunity like that." "Excellent. Maya, I'd like you to be our inaugural performer for this new program. We'll call it Original Voices, and we'll start planning it right away." Dr. Chen made some notes on a pad. "In the meantime, I think it would be valuable for me to observe some of our current arts programming and see how we might better serve all of our students' creative needs." There was something in the way she said this that made me think Dr. Chen was planning to take a much closer look at how the school play auditions had been conducted. Maya seemed to pick up on it too, because she asked, "Dr. Chen, will Ms. Harrison be upset that I'm getting to perform my own version of Alice?" Dr. Chen smiled. "Maya, Ms. Harrison's job is to nurture and encourage student talent in all its forms. I'm sure she'll be interested to see what you've created, just as I was." As we prepared to leave, Dr. Chen walked us to the door of her office. "Maya, I want you to know that what you shared today reminded me of why I became an educator. Students like you, who think deeply and create fearlessly, are exactly what makes this profession meaningful." Maya beamed, standing a little taller as we walked back through the hallways toward the main entrance. When we reached my car, she finally let her excitement show fully. "Mama, did you hear that? She wants me to perform for the whole school. She said my story was remarkable." "She did, sweetheart, and she was absolutely right. You are remarkable." As we drove home, Maya chattered excitedly about Dr. Chen's idea for the Original Voices program, about how other kids could share their creative work, about how maybe her friend Tommy could perform his comedic monologues, and Sarah could share her original songs. Her enthusiasm was infectious, and I found myself marveling at how quickly the narrative had shifted from rejection to recognition, from disappointment to opportunity. That evening, Maya called Ms. Rodriguez to share the news about her meeting with Dr. Chen. I could hear Ms. Rodriguez's excitement through the phone, her voice animated as she congratulated Maya and offered to help her prepare for her upcoming performance. "Ms. Rodriguez wants to work with me during recess next week," Maya reported after hanging up. "She said she has some ideas about staging and maybe using some simple props to enhance the storytelling." Later that night, as I was finishing up some freelance work on my laptop, Maya appeared in the doorway of my home office in her pajamas, holding her notebook. "Mama, I've been thinking about what Dr. Chen said about me being an inaugural performer. What does inaugural mean exactly?" "It means you'll be the first. The very first student to perform in this new program." Maya considered this seriously. "So I'm kind of like a pioneer?" "Yes, exactly like a pioneer. You're helping to create something new and important for future students." She smiled with satisfaction. "I like that. I like being the first instead of being the one who got rejected." As I tucked her into bed that night, Maya was quiet for a while, processing everything that had happened. "Mama," she said finally, "I'm glad Ms. Harrison didn't choose me for her play." "Really? Why?" "Because if she had, I might never have written my own version of Alice. I might never have discovered that I could create something completely my own instead of just trying to fit into what someone else wanted." Her wisdom took my breath away once again. This 9-year-old had learned something that many adults never figure out: that rejection from one path can lead to discovering an entirely different and often better direction. 2 weeks later, Maya performed her version of Alice in Wonderland for an audience of 3 classes in the school's multimedia room. I sat in the back, watching my daughter command the attention of 60 students and 4 teachers with her gentle, powerful storytelling. When she finished, the applause was thunderous and sustained, and several students raised their hands to ask questions about how she had developed her characters and whether she was planning to write more stories. Dr. Chen kept her word about the Original Voices program, and it launched officially the following month with Maya as the featured performer in front of the entire school. But by then, she was already helping other students prepare their own presentations, mentoring them on how to find their unique creative voices. Ms. Harrison attended Maya's school-wide performance. Afterward, she approached us in the hallway, her expression complicated and somewhat chastened. "Maya," she said carefully, "that was a beautiful interpretation of Alice. I can see why Dr. Chen was so impressed with your work." Maya smiled politely. "Thank you, Ms. Harrison." There was an awkward pause, and I could see Ms. Harrison struggling with something she wanted to say but couldn't quite find the words for. Finally, she settled on, "I hope you'll continue to pursue your interest in theater, Maya. You clearly have a gift for storytelling." It wasn't an apology, but it was acknowledgement, and Maya accepted it graciously before we walked away together. David and Stephanie attended Maya's school-wide performance too, though they arrived after it had already started and left immediately afterward. David caught up with us in the parking lot as we were loading Maya's props into the car. "That was impressive," he said, sounding genuinely surprised. "I had no idea Maya could do something like that." "Maya has always been able to do amazing things," I replied evenly. "You just had to be willing to see them." He shifted uncomfortably, perhaps recognizing the implicit criticism in my words. "Well, congratulations, Maya. You should be proud of yourself." Maya thanked him politely, but I could see she was more interested in getting home to call Ms. Rodriguez and tell her how everything had gone than in processing her father's belated recognition. That night, as we celebrated with ice cream and Maya's favorite movie, she looked at me with that serious expression she gets when she's working through something important. "Mama, do you think everything happens for a reason?" "What makes you ask that?" "Well, if Ms. Harrison had chosen me for her play, I would never have written my own version of Alice. And if I hadn't written my own version, I wouldn't have discovered that I love creating original stories. And if I hadn't discovered that, there wouldn't be an Original Voices program for other kids to share their creativity." I smiled, amazed once again by her ability to find meaning and purpose in what had initially seemed like pure disappointment. "I think you might be onto something there. So maybe getting rejected was the best thing that could have happened to me." "Maybe it was. Or maybe you're just the kind of person who knows how to turn difficult things into beautiful things." As Maya grew older, she continued to write and perform original works. The Original Voices program became one of Riverside Elementary's most popular monthly events, inspiring children to explore poetry, music, visual art, and storytelling in ways that celebrated their individual perspectives and talents. Years later, when Maya was in high school and had been accepted to several colleges with strong creative writing programs, she would often say that getting rejected from the elementary school play was the moment she learned that there was more than one way to tell a story, more than one path to artistic expression. She learned that sometimes the most beautiful performances come not from fitting into someone else's vision, but from having the courage to share your own. And she learned that when one door closes, it might not be a rejection at all. It might just be the universe's way of pointing you toward a door you hadn't noticed yet, one that leads to exactly where you were meant to be all along. The morning of Maya's first Original Voices performance arrived with an energy that felt different from any school day we had experienced before. Maya had been awake since 5:30, not from anxiety but from pure excitement, moving through her morning routine with the focused determination of someone who knew they were about to do something important. She had laid out her clothes the night before. The purple dress with silver stars that had become her performance outfit, along with a simple silver necklace that had belonged to my grandmother. As she brushed her teeth, I could hear her humming, under her breath, running through the vocal warm-ups Ms. Rodriguez had taught her. Over breakfast, Maya reviewed her notes one final time, though by now she knew her performance by heart. We had spent weeks refining it together, working with Ms. Rodriguez during lunch breaks and after school to develop staging that would work in the school's multi-purpose room where the Original Voices performances would be held. Maya had insisted on keeping the staging simple, just herself and a few props she had created. A small blue shawl to represent Alice's dress, a white pocket watch on a chain for the White Rabbit, different hats for the various Wonderland characters. She understood instinctively that the power of her performance lay not in elaborate costumes or sets, but in her ability to transform herself and transport her audience through the sheer force of her storytelling. "Are you nervous?" I asked, though she seemed remarkably calm for someone about to perform in front of the entire student body of Riverside Elementary. "A little," she admitted, taking a careful bite of her toast. "But it's a good kind of nervous. Like right before you dive into a swimming pool. You know it's going to be amazing once you're in the water." I marveled at her analogy, at how she had learned to reframe her emotions in empowering ways. This was the same child who, just 2 months ago, had sat in our car after the audition rejection, questioning whether she had any talent at all. Now she possessed a confidence that came not from arrogance, but from a deep understanding of her own abilities and worth. The drive to school felt both eternal and instantaneous. Maya sat in the back seat, her prop bag carefully positioned beside her, gazing out the window at the familiar streets of our neighborhood. When we pulled into the school parking lot, I could see that something special was happening. There were more cars than usual, including several I didn't recognize. Dr. Chen had mentioned that some district administrators and arts education specialists would be attending to observe this inaugural event. "Look, Mama," Maya said softly. "Ms. Rodriguez is waiting for us." Indeed, her teacher stood near the main entrance, holding a small bouquet of flowers and wearing a smile that could have powered the entire building. As we approached, I could see the pride and excitement radiating from her. Over the past weeks, Ms. Rodriguez had become more than Maya's teacher. She had become her champion, her creative collaborator, and one of her most dedicated supporters. "Good morning, Star," Ms. Rodriguez said, presenting Maya with the flowers. "These are from my garden. I thought they might bring you good luck, though I don't think you'll need it." Maya accepted the flowers with the solemnity of someone receiving an award. "Thank you, Ms. Rodriguez. They're beautiful." "Are you ready for this, Maya?" "I think so. I keep thinking about what you told me, that the audience wants me to succeed, that they're on my side from the moment I step onto the stage." Ms. Rodriguez nodded approvingly. "Exactly right. And remember, this is your story. You know it better than anyone else in that room. Trust yourself." As we walked through the hallways toward the multi-purpose room, I noticed something wonderful happening. Students were greeting Maya with genuine enthusiasm, calling out encouragement and expressing their excitement about her performance. Word had spread throughout the school about what Maya was going to do, and rather than jealousy or indifference, there was a palpable sense of anticipation and support. "Maya!" called a girl from her class named Sarah. "My mom says she's coming to watch your performance too." She heard about it from Mrs. Chen and asked if parents could attend. "Really?" Maya's eyes widened. She hadn't expected an audience beyond the school community. "Yeah, lots of parents are coming. Everyone's talking about how you wrote your own version of Alice in Wonderland." As we continued toward the multi-purpose room, more students joined us, creating an impromptu parade of support. I watched Maya absorb their excitement without losing her own sense of focus and purpose. She had learned to accept praise gracefully, while staying grounded in her own understanding of why she was doing this. The multi-purpose room had been transformed for the occasion. Dr. Chen and the custodial staff had arranged the space to create an intimate theater setting with rows of chairs facing a small raised platform that would serve as Maya's stage. Behind the platform, they had hung a simple blue backdrop that would serve as a neutral background for her performance. The lighting had been adjusted to create a warm, welcoming atmosphere that felt both professional and comfortable. Dr. Chen approached us as we entered the room, her face glowing with excitement and pride. "Maya, are you ready for this?" "I am," Maya replied with quiet confidence. "Dr. Chen, thank you for believing in my story. Thank you for writing it and for being brave enough to share it with all of us." As the room began to fill with students, teachers, and parents, I felt a mixture of pride and anticipation that was almost overwhelming. Maya's journey from rejection to this moment had been remarkable, but what struck me most was how she had grown not just as a performer, but as a person. She had learned to trust her own voice, to value her unique perspective, and to understand that there are many ways to tell a story worth hearing. Emma and Stephanie were among the parents who had come to watch, sitting in the middle section, with David. I caught David's eye across the room and saw something I hadn't expected. genuine curiosity about what Maya was going to do. Stephanie sat beside him with a neutral expression, though I could see her taking in the excitement of the other audience members with some puzzlement. Ms. Harrison had positioned herself near the back of the room, and I wondered what she was, thinking as she observed the enthusiasm Maya's performance had generated. Dr. Chen had made it clear to all staff that attendance at Original Voices events was optional, but encouraged, and I was surprised to see that Ms. Harrison had chosen to come. Dr. Chen stepped onto the small platform to address the audience. "Good morning, everyone. Welcome to the very first Original Voices performance here at Riverside Elementary. This program was created to celebrate the diverse ways our students express their creativity and share their unique perspectives with our school community." She paused, looking out at the assembled crowd with obvious satisfaction. "Today, we're honored to have Maya Martinez as our inaugural performer. Maya has written and will perform her own interpretation of Alice in Wonderland, a story that explores themes of empathy, understanding, and the courage to help others find their way." The applause that greeted Maya as she stepped onto the platform was warm and sustained. I watched her take a moment to ground herself, to look out at the faces in the audience with calm acknowledgement rather than fear. She had learned to see an audience not as judges waiting to criticize, but as fellow humans ready to receive whatever gift she was offering. "Thank you all for being here," Maya began, her voice clear and carrying easily through the room. "The story I'm going to share with you grew out of a question I had about Alice's motivations. Why did she really follow the white rabbit? What if her curiosity was actually compassion?" And then she began to transform. I had seen Maya perform her Alice story dozens of times during our practice sessions, but something about this moment, the energy of the audience, the significance of the occasion, the culmination of everything she had learned about herself, elevated her performance to something truly extraordinary. Maya's Alice wasn't the wide-eyed innocent of most interpretations, nor was she the slightly spoiled child of Carol's original. This Alice was thoughtful, perceptive, and driven by a deep sense of empathy. When Maya portrayed her seeing the white rabbit's distress, her entire posture conveyed someone who recognized sadness and chose to act on it rather than ignore it. The transformation into the white rabbit was seamless and remarkable. Maya's voice took on a tremulous quality that perfectly captured someone lost and overwhelmed, while her physical presence became smaller, more vulnerable. She conveyed the rabbit's desperation to find his lost treasure, a locket containing the only photograph of his deceased grandmother, with such authenticity that I could see audience members leaning forward in their seats. As Maya moved through the various encounters in Wonderland, each character transformation was a revelation. The Mad Hatter wasn't simply mad, but was an artist whose creations had been mocked and dismissed until he began to believe he was truly crazy. Maya's portrayal showed his pain and confusion, but also his underlying hope that someone might understand his vision. When Alice validated his creativity and helped him remember why he loved making beautiful things, there wasn't a dry eye in the room. The caterpillar, in Maya's version, had forgotten how to transform. He sat on his mushroom, trapped in a form that no longer served him, paralyzed by fear of change. Alice helped him remember that transformation was not just possible but natural, that growth required courage but led to beauty. Maya's physical portrayal of this character was subtle but powerful. She seemed to embody the weight of stagnation and then the lightness of rediscovered possibility. Perhaps most powerfully, Maya's Queen of Hearts was not a tyrant, but a ruler who had been betrayed so many times that she protected herself by threatening others before they could hurt her. When Alice showed her genuine kindness without expecting anything in return, the Queen's walls began to crumble, revealing someone who desperately wanted to trust but had forgotten how. Throughout each encounter, Maya's Alice remained consistently compassionate, asking thoughtful questions and offering genuine presence rather than easy solutions. She helped each character not by fixing their problems, but by seeing them clearly. and reflecting back their own wisdom and strength. The climax of Maya's story came when Alice helped the White Rabbit find his lost locket, not through magic or adventure, but by helping him remember where he had last felt truly safe and loved. The reunion between the rabbit and his grandmother's memory, as portrayed by Maya, was so moving that the audience was completely silent, hanging on every word. But Maya's most brilliant addition to the Alice story was the ending. Her Alice didn't simply wake up from a dream or find herself back in the ordinary world. Instead, she realized that Wonderland had always existed. In the spaces between people where understanding lived, in the moments when someone chose compassion over judgment, in the willingness to see beyond surface appearances to the truth of someone's heart. And Alice knew, Maya concluded, her voice soft but clear, that she could return to Wonderland anytime she chose to really see someone, to really listen, to offer her presence as a gift. Because Wonderland isn't a place you fall into, it's a way of being in the world. The silence that followed Maya's final words was profound and complete. For a long moment, the entire room seemed suspended in the world she had created, reluctant to return to ordinary reality. Then, slowly, the applause began. It started with Dr. Chen, then spread throughout the room, building into something that felt like a celebration not just of Maya's performance, but of the power of storytelling itself. Students leaped to their feet, followed by teachers and parents. The standing ovation continued for what felt like several minutes, and I could see Maya's face glowing with surprise and joy. She had known her story was good, but I don't think she had expected this level of response. When the applause finally subsided, Dr. Chen returned to the platform. Maya, that was absolutely extraordinary. Would you be willing to answer some questions from the audience? Several hands shot up immediately. Dr. Chen called on a fifth grader named Marcus. Maya, how did you think of making Alice care about helping people instead of just exploring? Maya considered the question seriously. I think everyone has moments when they notice someone is sad or struggling. Most of the time, we don't know what to do about it, so we just keep walking. But Alice decided to do something. I wanted to explore what would happen if more people made that choice. A teacher from the third grade team raised her hand. Maya, your interpretations of the classic Wonderland characters were so unique and meaningful. How did you develop those characterizations? I started by thinking about what each character might be feeling underneath their actions, Maya explained. Like, why is the Mad Hatter having a tea party that never ends? Maybe he's trying to create a space where people can come together and feel welcome. Why is the Queen always shouting, "Off with their heads"? Maybe she's scared of being hurt, so she tries to scare people first. Ms. Harrison raised her hand, and I felt my breath catch. Maya, that was a beautiful performance. I'm curious about your process. How did you decide which emotions to emphasize in each scene? Maya looked directly at Ms. Harrison as she answered. I tried to think about how each character was feeling, and then I tried to feel that way myself. My mom helped me understand that good acting isn't about being loud or dramatic. It's about being truthful. I saw something shift in Ms. Harrison's expression at Maya's diplomatic response. There was no accusation in Maya's words, no reference to their history, just a simple statement about her artistic process. But the implication was clear. She had learned to value truth over performance, authenticity over volume. Several parents asked questions about Maya's writing process, her inspiration, and her future plans. Through each response, Maya demonstrated not just her talent, but her thoughtfulness, her ability to articulate her creative choices and reflect on their meaning. David raised his hand toward the end of the question period. Maya, I'm proud of what you've accomplished here. What advice would you give to other kids who want to tell their own stories? Maya looked at her father for a moment, and I could see her choosing her words carefully. I would tell them that their stories matter. even if some people don't understand them at first. Sometimes you have to be patient and keep believing in what you're creating. And it helps to have people who encourage you and help you get better. Her response was gracious but pointed. She was acknowledging his question, while also making it clear that support and encouragement were essential for young artists, something she had found from other sources when it wasn't available from him. As the formal question period ended, and audience members began to approach Maya individually to offer congratulations, I watched my daughter handle each interaction with grace and genuine appreciation. She thanked everyone sincerely, listened to their comments with attention, and responded to their questions with the same thoughtfulness she had shown on stage. Dr. Chen approached us as the crowd began to thin. "Jessica, Maya, I want you to know that today exceeded every expectation I had for this program. Maya's performance wasn't just entertaining, it was transformative. I've already received requests from several other schools in the district asking if we could share what we've learned about supporting student creativity." Maya's eyes widened. "Really? Other schools want to start original voices programs too?" "They do indeed. Maya, you've helped us understand something important about how we can better serve all of our students' artistic gifts. I hope you realize that what you've done today will benefit countless other young artists." As we gathered Maya's props and prepared to leave, I reflected on the journey that had brought us to this moment. 2 months ago, Maya had been rejected from a school play because she didn't fit someone's narrow definition of what a performer should be. Today, she had created something entirely new, something that celebrated not just her own gifts, but the importance of recognizing and nurturing diverse forms of artistic expression. The ride home was filled with Maya's excited recounting of every moment of the performance, every question from the audience, every congratulatory comment from her classmates. Her joy was infectious, but what struck me most was her awareness of the larger significance of what had happened. "Mama," she said as we pulled into our apartment complex parking lot, "do you think other kids will be less afraid to share their stories now that they've seen mine? I think you've shown them that it's possible to create something meaningful and personal, and that people will respond to authenticity and truth." "Good. That's what I hoped would happen." That evening, as Maya worked on her homework at the kitchen table, she looked up at me with that serious expression that meant she was processing something important. "Mama, I've been thinking about what happened today, and about everything that led up to it." "What have you been thinking?" "I'm glad Ms. Harrison didn't give me a part in her play. Not because I want her to feel bad, but because if I had gotten that part, I would have spent all my time trying to be what she wanted instead of discovering what I could create on my own." I sat down across from her, amazed once again by her maturity and insight. "That's a profound realization, sweetheart." "I learned something important, Mama. Sometimes what looks like a rejection is actually a redirection. Sometimes the universe closes one door because it wants you to notice a different door, one that leads to something better than what you originally wanted." "Where did you learn that wisdom?" Maya smiled. "From you. You showed me that when one person doesn't see your worth, it doesn't mean you're not valuable. It just means they're not the right person to appreciate what you have to offer. And then you helped me find the people who could see what I was really capable of." Over. The following weeks, the Original Voices program became one of the most anticipated monthly events at Riverside Elementary. Students began signing up to share poetry, original songs, short stories, and various forms of performance art. Maya became an unofficial mentor to other young performers, helping them develop confidence in their own unique voices and creative visions. Ms. Harrison approached Maya and me in the hallway one afternoon about a month after the Alice performance. Her demeanor was different, less authoritative, more genuinely curious. "Maya," she began, "I've been thinking about your performance, and your creative process. I wonder if you might be interested in helping me with something." Maya waited politely for her to continue. I'm reimagining how I approach auditions and casting. Instead of focusing only on traditional performance skills, I'd like to find ways to recognize different types of artistic talent. I was wondering if you might be willing to share your insights about alternative approaches to character development and storytelling. Maya considered this request seriously. I'd be happy to help, Ms. Harrison. I think every student has something unique to offer if we're patient enough to discover what it is. I think you're absolutely right about that. Their collaboration led to significant changes in how Riverside Elementary's drama program operated. Auditions became more inclusive, with multiple ways for students to demonstrate their abilities. The spring play expanded to include ensemble pieces that allowed for different performance styles, and Ms. Harrison began incorporating creative writing exercises that help students develop deeper connections to their characters. David and Stephanie's relationship with Maya evolved gradually following her original voice's debut. David made more effort to attend school events and to ask Maya about her creative projects. While their relationship remained somewhat formal, there was a new element of respect in their interactions. Stephanie, perhaps recognizing that her previous dismissiveness had been misguided, began including Maya more meaningfully in family gatherings and showing genuine interest in her artistic pursuits. Dr. Chen kept her promise about expanding the program beyond Riverside Elementary. By the end of the school year, 6 other schools in the district had implemented their own versions of original voices, each adapted to their unique communities and student populations. Maya was invited to speak at a district-wide assembly about the importance of supporting diverse forms of student expression. As Maya grew older, her confidence in her own voice and creative vision continued to strengthen. She wrote and performed original pieces for the Original Voices program throughout her elementary school years, each one exploring different themes and experimenting with various forms of storytelling. Other students began to see her not as someone who had been rejected from the real play, but as someone who had created something entirely new and valuable. The impact of Maya's experience extended beyond her own artistic development. Parents began to advocate more actively for inclusive arts programming. Teachers started incorporating more creative writing and original performance opportunities into their curricula. The school's definition of artistic excellence expanded to encompass emotional intelligence, originality, and the ability to connect with audiences through authentic expression. Years later, when Maya was accepted to a prestigious college with a full scholarship for creative writing, she would often reflect on the day that had seemed like the end of her performing dreams, but had actually been the beginning of understanding her true artistic gifts. She learned that sometimes the most meaningful success comes not from fitting into existing opportunities, but from creating new possibilities that didn't exist before. In her college application essay, Maya wrote about the transformative power of rejection, about how being told she wasn't good enough for one thing led her to discover she was more than good enough to create something entirely new. She wrote about the importance of having advocates who see potential where others see limitations, and about the responsibility that comes with using your voice to create opportunities for others. Most importantly, Maya learned that true artistic success isn't measured by whether you get chosen for someone else's vision, but by whether you have the courage to develop and share your own. She discovered that the most powerful performances come not from trying to be what others expect, but from being fully and authentically yourself. The Original Voices program that began with Maya's Alice in Wonderland performance continued long after she graduated from Riverside Elementary. Each monthly showcase became a celebration of student creativity, a space where young artists could experiment with their voices and share their unique perspectives with a supportive community. Teachers and administrators from other districts would often visit Riverside to observe how the program worked and to understand how they might implement similar initiatives in their own schools. Maya's story became part of the school's oral tradition, passed down from older students to newer ones as an example of how creativity and persistence could transform disappointment into triumph. Her Original Voices debut was remembered not just as an impressive performance, but as the moment when Riverside Elementary committed itself to recognizing and nurturing all forms of artistic talent. The Alice in Wonderland that Maya created that day remained special, not because it was the most polished or professional performance ever given at the school, but because it represented something essential about the human spirit, the ability to find beauty and meaning in unexpected places, the courage to offer your authentic self to the world, and the power of one person's vision to inspire positive change in an entire community. And every time a new student stepped onto the Original Voices stage to share their own creative work, they were standing in the legacy of Maya's brave decision to transform rejection into opportunity, to create her own path when the conventional route was closed to her, and to prove that sometimes the most beautiful doors are the ones you build yourself. Up next, you've got 2 more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out.